Get comfortable, settle in, because tonight we are riding into one of the most carefully crafted game worlds ever built, and we are not going to rush a single step of it. Red Dead Redemption 2 is not just a game about outlaws and gunfights. It is a world that breathes and whispers and hides things in corners you would never think to look. Rockstar spent over 8 years building this frontier, and buried inside every forest, every swamp, every snowfield, and every shadowed alley of Saint Denis, there are secrets that most players rode right past without ever knowing they were there. Some of these are funny little winks from the developers. Some are deeply unsettling. Some are full mysteries that still have not been solved after years of players digging through the game files trying to understand what exactly Rockstar was thinking. And some are just beautifully quiet details that reward the kind of player who slows their horse to a walk and actually pays attention to the world around them. Tonight we are going through 100 of them. 100 Easter eggs, secrets, hidden encounters, and strange discoveries buried in the map of Red Dead Redemption 2. We are going to take our time with each one. We are going to talk about where to find them, what makes them special, and what they actually mean. Some entries connect to real history. Some connect to other Rockstar games. Some connect to movies, books, folklore, and legends that reach back centuries. And a handful of them connect to absolutely nothing we can identify, which might be the most interesting ones of all. So, dim the lights, put your boots up, let the world outside go quiet. We are going to spend a long, slow evening in 1899, and by the time we are done, you will understand why people are still playing this game and still finding new things in it years after release. Section 1. The Skywatchers and the Things That Come in the Night. We start with the ones that reach furthest beyond the edges of the game world, the ones that made players stop dead when they first stumbled across them and just stare at their screen trying to process what they were seeing. Number 1. The first UFO at Honey's Bethel. There is a small, falling-apart shack sitting in the wilderness north of Emerald Ranch, right up near the Heartland Overflow. From the outside, it looks like nothing. A rotten building nobody has tended to in years, surrounded by weeds and quiet. But step inside and the story changes immediately. Stretched across the floor are the skeletal remains of several people, arranged in a way that makes it very clear they did not simply wander in and fall asleep. They died here deliberately, together, in a pattern that has the unmistakable feel of a ritual. On what appears to have been the leader's desk, there is a note. It is called The Mysterious Sermon, and it tells of a figure called Kukawaba, Voyager of Time and Galaxies. It speaks of ascending beyond the physical world, of a light that will carry true believers upward to something greater than human existence. The people who left those bones believed with everything they had that something was going to come for them. They were right. Return to that shack at exactly 2 a.m, in-game time, and walk back through the door. The moment you cross the threshold, a deep green light floods the interior, coming from directly above. Look up through what is left of the roof, and hanging there in the dark sky is a flying saucer, a genuine, unmistakable, slowly rotating extraterrestrial craft, hovering directly over the spot where those cultists gave their lives waiting for it to appear. It will stay there for roughly 2 in-game hours. Then it moves on, as quietly as it arrived. The detail Rockstar built into this Easter egg is what elevates it beyond a simple visual joke. The note, the bones, the arrangement, the way the cult had clearly been waiting there for some time. It tells a complete little tragedy without a single cutscene. A group of true believers sat in that shack, convinced beyond all doubt that Kukawaba was coming. And then Kukawaba actually came, long after every last one of them was gone. Number 2. The second UFO at Mount Shan. One alien encounter was not enough for Rockstar. After triggering the Honey's Bethel sighting, there is a second location that becomes active. Head to the peak of Mount Shan, which sits north of Strawberry in West Elizabeth, and arrive there in the late evening after the sky has gone fully dark. Look up at the right moment, and you will see the same craft from Honey's Bethel moving through the night sky above the mountain. It does not hover this time. It arcs across the darkness briefly and then vanishes. The connection between the two sightings has never been definitively explained. Whether the craft is drawn to Mount Shan for a reason related to what else is found near that peak, which we will get to shortly, or whether it simply circles the region on some unknowable schedule, is a question Rockstar has left entirely open. What matters is the detail. This is not a craft that exists only in one moment. It moves. It has a root. It is doing something out there in the dark above the frontier. Number 3. The Frozen Couple, near Spider Gorge. Head north, up into the deep cold country, near where Deadboot Creek and Spider Gorge meet. In a snow-covered area in that high, desolate terrain, you will find a camp. 2 figures are seated there, huddled together, frozen solid. They are locked in each other's arms, their faces turned skyward, their bodies crystallized mid-moment. If you look closely at what they were looking at when they died, the implication is clear. They were watching the sky, watching it so intently, so expectantly, that they sat in the open cold and waited, and the cold claimed them before whatever they were watching for ever arrived. This is the second breadcrumb in the UFO sequence, and it carries a very different emotional weight than the shack. Those cultists at Hani's Bethel had each other, had the warmth of shared belief, had a structured ceremony. These 2 people had nothing but each other and the open sky. There is something achingly quiet about finding them out there, in all that white emptiness, arms intertwined, faces lifted to the stars, waiting for something that never came down for them. Come back to the camp a couple of in-game days later, and you will see one more detail has changed in the scene, deepening the mystery without resolving it. Number 4. The Mysterious Sermon Note. This is worth pausing on by itself. Separate from the UFO encounter. The mysterious sermon found in Hani's Bethel is one of the most carefully written pieces of environmental text in the game. It reads like a genuine document from a genuine belief system, not like a throwaway developer joke. Kuhukawaba is described with specific language, borrowed from the kind of religious fringe movements that actually existed in the late 19th century, groups that blended science fiction speculation with spiritual longing in ways that sound completely alien to modern ears, but were surprisingly common in that period of American history. Rockstar wrote that document well enough that it feels like it could have been real. And that is the thing about the best Easter eggs in this game. They do not feel grafted onto the world from the outside. They feel like they belong there. Number 5. The alien figurines and cave paintings scattered across the game world, if you know where to look, are cave paintings and carvings that seem to depict figures that do not belong in any known cultural tradition of the period. Some of these are connected to other Easter eggs and mystery chains, but a few exist independently, sitting on rock faces in remote locations with no associated quest marker, no journal entry, no explanation, just paint on stone showing figures that do not look entirely human. Rockstar built a world big enough that even their throwaway details have layers to them. Number 6. The Ghost of Agnes Dowd. We move from things in the sky to things in the swamp. And this is where the mood shifts considerably. Agnes Dowd is a ghost, a real one, in the truest sense the game has to offer. She can be found in the northwest section of Blue Water Marsh, in the fog and the dark, between the hours of 9 at night and 3 in the morning. She will not appear every time you look. She will not always be visible, though you will sometimes hear her before you see her, a voice coming through the trees, hysterical and raw and grieving, calling out into the dark for someone who is not there to answer. If you approach her, she vanishes. She will not let you get close. She never does. What makes Agnes special is that Rockstar built her not as a single encounter, but as a series of 16 separate appearances, each one revealing a little more of her story. Agnes Dowd fell in love with a married man. She fell completely and catastrophically, the way people do when they cannot help it and know they should stop. When the relationship ended the way those relationships always end, she could not survive it. You can find her grave in the graveyard at Shady Bell, and the date tells you she died in 1883. 16 years before the events of the game. Each time you find her in the marsh, she gives you another fragment, the voice of a woman who never found peace because the pain she carried was bigger than death itself. And so, she stayed. And she stayed. And she is still staying, out there in the fog, calling for someone who has been gone for over a decade and will never come back. There is no quest attached to Agnes Dowd. There is no reward. You do not get a gold medal or a trophy for witnessing all 16 encounters. You get 16 glimpses of a tragedy that the game trusts you to care about on its own terms. Number 7. The Ghost Train. About the time you think the supernatural elements of this game are going to stay comfortably weird and distant, you are riding through the north of Lemoyne late at night and your horse stops. Horses in this game have a sixth sense for danger. They shy away from predators, tense up near gunfire, react to things you have not noticed yet. So, when your horse suddenly locks up and refuses to move forward on what appears to be a perfectly ordinary stretch of track, you know something is coming. The ghost train arrives on the old tracks near the northwest edge of Lemoyne, in those early hours of the morning around 2 or 3. It is shorter than the regular trains, older looking. It moves through the same physical space that normal trains use, but there is something immediately, clearly wrong about it. The light is wrong. The sound is wrong. The whole thing sits slightly sideways against reality, visible but not quite present in the way solid things are. Your horse will not go near it. Most horses, trained or not, will flatly refuse to approach. And as the train passes through, there is that specific uncomfortable feeling that you are watching something that was not meant to be seen, something that slipped through from wherever old things go when they are finished. Rockstar may have built this as a nod to the Phantom Train from Final Fantasy VI, one of the most memorable moments in that classic game, but it also fits perfectly within the folklore tradition of the American West, where ghost train stories were genuinely common. Railroads in the 1800s claimed thousands of lives through accidents and disasters, and in a culture where the supernatural was taken seriously, people reported seeing the trains those workers died on, still running their routes long after the crashes. Number 8. The Night Folk. If the ghost train makes the swamps of Lemoyne feel haunted, the night folk make them feel dangerous in a different and more visceral way. They appear in the darkness, pale figures that move along the edges of vision, never quite materializing until it is already too late to respond comfortably. The night folk carry knives. They do not use guns, which in the context of this game where everybody has a gun, makes them feel uniquely wrong, like they operate by different rules than anyone else. Their skin is pale in a way that suggests either something deeply unhealthy or something that never spends time in sunlight. They are covered in what appears to be blood and swamp mud. They have been interpreted as everything from a violent cult to something genuinely supernatural, and the game never clarifies which reading is correct. What is documented is their behavior. They are patient. They are organized in a way that most random encounters in this game are not. Players have reported finding a night folk member holding the reins of their panicked horse while others close in from behind. They plan. They anticipate. And uniquely among all the enemy factions in the game, they specifically target your horse. The O'Driscolls want to rob you. The Lemoyne Raiders want to cause problems. The night folk want to make sure you cannot run. Your horse goes first. If you survive a night folk encounter, you can eventually unlock a stranger mission called A Fine Night for it, which sends you into their territory with an old Cajun man who needs them cleared out of his area. It is one of the most atmospheric and genuinely unsettling missions in the entire game. Completing it does not make the night folk disappear. It just solves one man's specific problem. They are still out there in the swamp when the mission is done, doing whatever it is they do in the dark. The night folk occupy a fascinating space in the game's supernatural ecosystem because they are the one element that feels genuinely ambiguous in both directions. The vampire is coded as supernatural because the game labels him that way. The ghost of Agnes Dowd is a ghost. The night folk might be a cult, might be something that emerged from the swamp and the isolation and the particular miseries of life in that bayou, or might be something that does not have a clean category. Their pale skin and their strategy and the way they move through the dark, like people who have adapted to it rather than simply tolerating it, suggest a community that has been doing whatever they do for long enough that they are very good at it now. How long and what they were before, and whether any individual night folk remembers a different life, questions the swamp does not answer. Number 9. The Cult Ritual Site. Head northwest of Owangila, west of Strawberry, and you will find an open area in the forest that has been very deliberately arranged. Stones placed in specific patterns, chalk drawings on the ground, and at the center of the arrangement, mounted on a spike, half a torso, just the top half, arranged with apparent care, like it was placed there as part of something. The drawings around the base of the spike are symbols that do not correspond to any culture or tradition the game explicitly identifies. There is a mask somewhere in the vicinity that you can actually pick up and wear. Rockstar built a wearable artifact out of what is clearly the remnant of a ritual sacrifice. What makes this location interesting is its proximity to other supernatural sites on the map. The wilderness in this part of the game holds several of these unexplained ritual locations, and the question of whether they are connected, whether they belong to the same tradition or group, is never answered. They sit there in the trees, quietly suggesting a history of the land that predates every living character in the story. The stones could be old. The chalk drawings could have been made last week. There is no way to tell from the physical evidence, and the game offers no journal entry to clarify. You simply find the clearing, and the spike, and the half-torso, and the symbols, and either you take the mask or you do not. And either way, the clearing does not care. Number 10. The meteor shower. On clear nights in certain parts of the map, if you stop and look up at the sky for long enough, you will witness a meteor shower. Rockstar rendered the night sky in this game with extraordinary detail. The stars are accurate to the era and location the game is set in. The moon cycles through its phases. Weather fronts move across the map in real time, and occasionally, streaks of light will cross that sky in clusters, burning up in the atmosphere above the frontier, completely indifferent to the lives playing out below them. Most players never stop long enough to see it. The game does not prompt you to look up. There is no notification telling you a meteor shower is happening. It just happens, out there in the darkness above the map, available to anyone patient enough to tilt the camera skyward and wait. Number 11. The Meteor House. Whatever fell out of that sky at some point did not all burn up on the way down. In the northeastern part of the map, there is a house that did not survive its encounter with whatever came screaming out of the sky. The structure has been obliterated from the inside, the walls blown outward, the roof gone, the interior open to the sky above it. Inside, the ruins are bodies, people who were simply at home when whatever it was arrived, who had no warning and no chance. The impact crater is visible, the circle of destruction radiating out from the point where something struck with enough force to demolish a dwelling and everyone inside it. Follow the crater outward, and you will find the actual impact site nearby, a massive gaping hole in the earth where the object buried itself. There is nothing supernatural about a meteor. Rocks from space hit the ground with some regularity, and the earth is covered in impact craters if you know where to look. But stumbling across this in the middle of the frontier, all that evidence of a sudden and completely arbitrary end to several ordinary lives carries a particular kind of weight. Arthur will sketch the house in his journal. His written note is one of the quieter bits of poetry the game hides in those pages. Number 12. The mysterious lights at 2 a.m. If you happen to be near the meteor house at 2 in the morning, walk out to the field directly west and look up at the sky. On the right night, in the right conditions, you will see lights that have no clear source moving across the darkness above you. Whether these are connected to the UFO encounters elsewhere on the map, whether they are a separate mystery, or whether they are simply a beautiful ambient detail Rockstar put in for players who were awake at the right time in the right place, no one has definitively established. This ambient phenomenon, lights in the sky with no obvious source and no in-game tooltip to explain them, is a quiet example of how Rockstar layers secrets in this world. The first layer is the thing you find by looking in the right place at the right time. The second layer is the question of whether what you found connects to anything else. The third layer is the possibility that the connection exists but has not been discovered yet. Red Dead Redemption 2 has been played for years by an enormous, dedicated community of players who have data mined the files and parsed the code and mapped every coordinate in the game world, and there are still encounters and details and possible connections that have not been fully resolved. Rockstar built a world big enough to hold mysteries that outlast the initial wave of exploration. Sometimes this game rewards you not for finding the answers, but just for being present at the right moment. The frontier is vast. The night is long. Look up when you get the chance. Before we move on, drop a comment right now telling us where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. Whether it is 2 in the morning in your bedroom or a lazy afternoon on the couch, we want to know. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a good time. This kind of video takes a long time to put together, and every subscriber makes the next one possible. Section 2. The Dead Who Did Not Leave. There is a difference in this game between things that are merely old and things that are genuinely haunted. This section is about the second kind. Number 13. Agnes Dowd's grave at Shady Bell. The graveyard at Shady Bell exists independently of the Agnes Dowd encounter in Blue Water Marsh, and most players who visit it will simply note the graves and move on. But Agnes Dowd has a headstone there, and it tells you the year she died and a fragment of what happened. It does not tell you everything. It does not tell you about the married man or the years of encounters in the fog. It just tells you she was there and that she is gone. Finding the grave before finding the ghost means that when you do eventually hear that voice in the marsh, you know exactly who it belongs to. Rockstar trusted players to make that connection on their own, without a quest marker pointing back to the headstone, without a notification saying you unlocked the backstory. The world simply contains both pieces of the story and expects you to walk into them in whatever order you happen to. Number 14. The Talking Trees of Roanoke Valley. There is a section of forest west of Roanoke Valley where, if you ride through in the right conditions, voices come from the trees. Not the sound of wind, not animals, not the ambient rustle of the game's procedural soundscape. Voices, whispering, coming from the tree line. It is unclear whether these are tied to a specific location trigger, whether they are spirits of the dead whose remains are somewhere in that forest, or whether they are something else entirely. The game does not explain them. You simply ride through and hear them and have to decide for yourself what they mean. Experienced players with good headphones report that the whispers seem to form words, though what those words are saying has never been conclusively agreed upon. Some players have heard what sounds like names. Others hear what sounds like warnings. This one sits in the category of mysteries that the more you try to pin down, the more they seem to recede from you. Number 15. The swamp hanging in the bayou country outside St. Denis. There is a location where you will encounter something that stops you before you understand what is happening. A dead body hanging from the trees over the swamp. Whoever it is has been there long enough that the scene is already completed. There is nothing you can do about it. What happens next is what players call extremely creepy, and they are not wrong. The game manages to turn a static environmental detail into an active moment of dread through nothing but timing and sound design. This is not a story Rockstar is telling you through cutscenes. It is telling you through space and atmosphere, and the way the swamp goes quiet at the exact wrong moment. Number 16. The man drowned on the shore at Shady Bell. Near Shady Bell, close enough to the water that it looks like the river brought him there is a body washed up on the bank. He is shackled. There is enough context in the environment to understand that this man was trying to get somewhere specific, trying to get free, and that the water had the final word. This is the kind of detail that people who study American history will immediately recognize and feel the weight of. Rockstar put it there, without commentary, without a notification, without a quest. It just exists at the edge of the water, as a quiet piece of historical reality embedded in the game world. Number 17. The dead Jesuit missionary in New Austin. After completing the main story and gaining access to New Austin as John, you can find the body of a Jesuit missionary in the southwest of the territory. The man is dead. His journey ended somewhere in the desert. On him is a letter from Cardinal Bianco, which you can read to understand the last chapter of his life, what he was trying to do, where he was going, why he was this far from anywhere, and what happened to prevent him from arriving. The letter is not dramatic. It does not reference outlaws or violence or the usual frontier dangers. It is a quiet, bureaucratic piece of correspondence that ended up becoming a dead man's final possession. The detail that Rockstar wrote Cardinal Bianco as a plausible historical figure gave him a voice that sounds genuine to the era and the institution, and then left his letter in the pocket of a corpse in the middle of the desert says something about the level of care that went into building this world. Number 18. The mass grave south of Van Horn Trading Post. South of Van Horn, if you ride out toward the water, there is a mass grave marked with a single stone. The marker does not give names, it gives numbers. Worker designations and death dates, the kind of notation a company might use when the people doing the dying were not considered important enough to record individually. The dates cluster together in a way that suggests a single event, something that took many lives at once. And the numbers suggest that those lives were valued primarily as labor. Arthur writes about it in his journal. His note is brief, as it tends to be when he encounters things the game trusts him to process without much elaboration. Number 19. The Shawshank Redemption reference. There is a location in Red Dead Redemption 2 that is built to look almost exactly like a scene from the 1994 film. Rockstar arranged the environment with enough specificity that once you make the connection, you cannot unmake it. The composition of the location, the way the light hits it, the particular melancholy the space carries all reference one of cinema's most enduring explorations of hope and endurance in a place designed to crush both. This one is purely affectionate. It is a piece of love letter from the development team to a film that clearly meant something to people in that building. Number 20. The Witch's Cauldron. Up in the wilderness of New Amberino, in the high, wild country where the trees grow thick and the paths run out, there is a small structure built around a tree. Sitting in it, or near it depending on when you visit, is a cauldron. Animal bones are arranged around it. There are what appear to be ingredient components on a nearby surface. Everything about the setup suggests someone has been working in this space, mixing something, working towards something. The cauldron contains a liquid. Rockstar, understanding exactly what kind of players built this game for, made the liquid drinkable. If you drink from the cauldron, Arthur collapses. He loses consciousness completely. When he wakes up, he is somewhere else, not somewhere close. The game has moved him a meaningful distance from where he passed out, and he has no memory of how he got there. His journal has no entry about what happened. There is no cutscene, no explanation, no payoff. He is simply elsewhere, blinking in the sunlight, with a very specific and unanswered question hanging in the air. Number 21. The tiny church in the swamps, hidden in the bayou country, built at a scale that makes no practical sense for human habitation, there is a miniature church, a fully detailed building that you would have to crouch down to peer inside. Whether this is a doll's house, a scale model someone built, a votive offering to something, or just a strange choice by some eccentric inhabitant of the swamp is entirely unclear. Arthur can interact with it. His reaction is characteristic. He notes it, he does not understand it, he moves on. Number 22. The Meditating Monk. In the high reaches of the East Grizzlies, near Cumberland Forest, there is a monk. He is sitting at the peak of a rock face, looking out over a view that, in the real geography of a place like this, would be genuinely extraordinary. He does not speak. He does not respond to being spoken to. He does not react to Arthur's presence at all. He is simply meditating, or something near enough to meditating that the word fits, completely uninterested in the outlaw who rode 2 hours through the mountains to find him. The view he is looking at is spectacular. Rockstar rendered it carefully, and it is worth sitting with the monk for a few minutes and simply looking at what he is looking at. This is one of those moments where the game rewards the kind of player who is in no particular hurry. The mountains stretch out in every direction, sharp and cold, and indifferent in the way that mountains are, and the monk sits at the edge of it all and remains perfectly still and clearly considers this to be enough. There is a tradition, across many contemplative practices, of seeking elevated places for extended quiet. The height creates literal distance from the concerns of the world below. The reduced oxygen of altitude produces effects on perception and thought that practitioners have documented across centuries. The cold at elevation keeps the mind from drifting in the specific ways that comfort encourages. The monk on his rock face in the Grizzlies is practicing something real, brought whole into the fiction of 1899, and the game respects it enough to leave him undisturbed by the main story's momentum. You can disturb him through dishonorable means. The game allows this. It will also cost you honor points to do it. Rockstar encoded the monk's peace as something worth protecting, something that has value, something the game's own morality system recognizes as worth keeping intact. You are free to break it, but you will know that you did. Number 7. The Ghost Train. About the time you think the supernatural elements of this game are going to stay comfortably weird and distant. You are riding through the north of Lemoyne late at night, and your horse stops. Horses in this game have a sixth sense for danger. They shy away from predators, tense up near gunfire, react to things you have not noticed yet. So, when your horse suddenly locks up and refuses to move forward on what appears to be a perfectly ordinary stretch of track, you know something is coming. The Ghost Train arrives on the old tracks near the northwest edge of Lemoyne, in those early hours of the morning around 2 or 3. It is shorter than the regular trains, older looking. It moves through the same physical space that normal trains use, but there is something immediately, clearly wrong about it. The light is wrong. The sound is wrong. The whole thing sits slightly sideways against reality, visible but not quite present in the way solid things are. Your horse will not go near it. Most horses, trained or not, will flatly refuse to approach. And as the train passes through, there is that specific uncomfortable feeling that you are watching something that was not meant to be seen, something that slipped through from wherever old things go when they are finished. Rockstar may have built this as a nod to the Phantom Train from Final Fantasy VI, one of the most memorable moments in that classic game. But it also fits perfectly within the folklore tradition of the American West, where ghost train stories were genuinely common. Railroads in the 1800s claimed thousands of lives through accidents and disasters, and in a culture where the supernatural was taken seriously, people reported seeing the trains those workers died on, still running their routes long after the crashes. The ghost train in Red Dead 2 does not harm you. It does not stop. It cannot be interacted with in any meaningful way. It simply passes through, trailing its wrongness behind it, and then the tracks are empty and your horse is spooked and the night is quiet again. Whatever it is, wherever it goes, it keeps its schedule. It was running those tracks before Arthur Morgan was born, and it will be running them long after the credits roll. During certain late-night rides near the old Civil War-era locations on the map, there are reports from players of encountering a figure in period military dress who does not behave like any other NPC in the game. He does not react normally to being approached. His movement patterns are wrong in the specific way that something wrong with this world tends to feel in this game. Not broken, just operating by different rules. The Civil War ended in 1865, 34 years before the events of Red Dead Redemption 2. But the game is built on land that remembers the war, that still carries the ruins of forts and hospitals and defensive positions. Old wounds in the landscape. Some of them, apparently, still have their wounds attached. The war produced casualties on a scale that the country had never experienced before and has not experienced since. Approximately 620,000 people died in the Civil War, a number so large that the infrastructure for processing that many deaths simply did not exist. Mass graves were common. Identification of remains was rare. The men who died in the battles that happened in the territory this game depicts were in many cases buried where they fell, in ground that 34 years later would become game map, would become the place where Arthur Morgan rides to the next mission. The frontier did not forget its dead. The frontier does not forget anything. Number 24, the well trap. There is a well somewhere on the map that is not what it appears to be. Approach it, and the ground gives way. You are underground, in a man-made chamber that someone clearly built for a purpose. The purpose was not good. The construction of the trap is detailed enough that it is clear whoever built it knew what they were doing and had done it before. The question of who built it, when, and whether they were ever caught for it is left completely open. The game puts you in the hole and then leaves you to figure out the rest. The chamber has the quality of having been used more than once. The walls are worn in ways that suggest they have been touched many times, not by the person who dug them, but by the people who found themselves in here unexpectedly, running their hands along the surface looking for a way out. There is a way out. It takes some doing, but there is a way out. Whether the people who came before you found it is a question the chamber does not answer. Section 3. The Strange Man. Some mysteries in this game have edges you can find, corners you can trace, shapes you can eventually understand, even if the full picture stays blurry. The Strange Man is not one of those mysteries. The Strange Man has no edges. He is the one thing in this entire game that Rockstar has looked directly at and said, even we do not know who he is. Number 25. The Cabin at Bayall Edge. The Strange Man has a cabin in Lemoyne, at a place called Bayall Edge. It sits by itself in the swampy wilderness, a quiet and unassuming structure that does not announce itself. Inside the cabin, there are writings on the walls, symbols and notes that read like the work of someone attempting to document a presence they cannot fully describe. There is a map of the town of Armadillo pinned up inside, with annotations. There is a painting on the wall. The painting is of a man. The man in the painting is initially incomplete, unfinished, rendered only in rough outlines. But here is where things get specific. Every 5 or 6 in-game days, the painting adds detail. It develops over time in the game world, as if someone is still working on it, as if someone comes back to the cabin between your visits and adds more of the figure. Number 26. The Mirror Reflection. After making enough visits to watch the painting develop toward completion, players who look into the mirror inside the cabin will see something they did not expect. The room behind Arthur, which should be empty, is not entirely empty. A figure is visible in the reflection for a fraction of a second before it disappears. The figure matches the description of the Strange Man from the original Red Dead Redemption. Formal dress, top hat, an unsettling degree of composure. He appears in the mirror, and he is gone before you can fully process what you saw. The game does not draw attention to this. There is no sound cue, no controller rumble, no notification. You either catch it or you miss it. Number 27. The Strange Man in Red Dead Redemption 1. For players who came to the sequel without playing the original game, the Strange Man is simply a mystery embedded in the world. For players who played the first game, he is something considerably more specific. In Red Dead Redemption, the Strange Man appeared to John Marston in multiple encounters, materializing on roadsides and at locations that John had no particular reason to visit. He knew things about John. He knew things about John's past with the Vanderlinde gang that John himself had buried or tried to forget. He asked pointed questions and offered answers that raised more questions than they resolved. He was implied to be God. He was implied to be the devil. He was implied to be death. Developers at Rockstar were asked directly about his identity and gave an answer that was not entirely satisfying, but was at least honest. Even they did not know for certain what he was meant to be. Number 28. The Cholera Plague Connection. The Strange Man's cabin contains a map of Armadillo, and in the 1907 section of the game, when you arrive in Armadillo as John, the town is in the grip of a cholera epidemic that has emptied most of it out. NPCs in the area reference a man in a black suit and a top hat who they describe as a Grim Reaper figure, someone who came to the town and brought the sickness with him. The description matches the Strange Man exactly. In the cabin at By-All Edge, there is a note that reads like a message to Herbert Moon, the shopkeeper in Armadillo, who is the only functioning business owner left in the devastated town. The note seems to reference a deal. Herbert Moon is alive while everyone around him is dying. And the note in the Strange Man's cabin suggests he knows why. This implication sits in the game unconfirmed. Rockstar did not build a cutscene to explain it. They built an abandoned cabin, a note, a sick town, and a shopkeeper who has no logical reason to have survived, and they left the connection for players to trace on their own. Number 29. Herbert Moon's portrait. If you visit Herbert Moon's general store in Armadillo and look carefully around the interior, there is a small portrait on the wall. John notices it. He comments that he recognizes the man in it, though he cannot quite place where from. Herbert Moon deflects the question. He says someone gave it to him. He says he keeps it because he likes it. The portrait is of the Strange Man. Number 30. Blind Man Cassidy's Warning. There is an NPC in the original game named Blind Man Cassidy who functions as an early warning system for things John has not yet encountered. In one of his cryptic pronouncements, he warns John that two people are looking for him. The first, he implies, is Edgar Ross. The second is left unnamed. The description fits the Strange Man. Number 31. The Strange Man's knowledge of the gang. The Strange Man's conversations in the first game demonstrate a comprehensive knowledge of John Marston's history that goes well beyond what any human observer could have accumulated. He knows specific details. He references moments John would not have discussed with strangers. He does not appear to have gathered this information through normal means, because normal means do not produce this kind of knowledge. Whether this is the knowledge of a divine being who witnesses all human lives, a supernatural entity that has been following John specifically, or something stranger still, is the game's central unresolved question. Number 32. The Rockstar Social Club label. When players upload screenshots taken in the Strange Man's cabin to the Rockstar Social Club, the location tag that appears in the metadata labels it not as By-All Edge or Strange Man's Shack. It labels it as Serial Killer. This is either a misfiled tag in the database, which seems unlikely given the precision applied to everything else in the game's construction, or Rockstar's developers quietly labeling the Strange Man's location with a term that adds one more layer to his identity. Number 33. What the Strange Man ultimately represents. There is a reading of the Strange Man that has nothing to do with literal theology or supernatural horror. In this reading, he is a narrative function given physical form, the figure in a Western story who witnesses the moral arc of the protagonist and serves as the measuring stick against which that arc is judged. Every great Western has some version of this character, someone who exists outside the violence and the money and the survival calculus of the main plot, who watches and reflects and occasionally offers the protagonist a chance to see themselves clearly. The original Red Dead Redemption is a story about a man being forced to confront the consequences of who he was. The Strange Man shows up precisely when John is most resistant to that confrontation. He does not force anything. He just asks questions and waits. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a story about Arthur Morgan choosing who he wants to be in the time he has left. The strange man's presence in the sequel is subtle, mostly present through the cabin and the painting. But the painting developing itself over time, the figure gradually resolving into clarity as the game progresses, feels very deliberately timed to Arthur's own arc. As Arthur becomes more certain of who he is in his final months, the painting of the strange man becomes more fully rendered. As Arthur's identity clarifies toward its conclusion, the strange man's image clarifies toward completion. This may be coincidence. It does not feel like coincidence. The developers put this sequence in a game that contains, at the conservative estimate, over 2,000 hours of combined content for a completionist player. Nobody is forced to visit that cabin. Nobody is required to come back 6 or 7 times over the course of many in-game weeks to watch the painting progress. The game offers no reward for doing so, no experience points or gold medals or story progression. It simply made the painting and made it change and put it in an obscure location where only the most curious and patient players would ever see all of it. That is the kind of game Red Dead Redemption 2 is. The strange man's portrait is not a trophy. It is a conversation that happens at the pace of the landscape itself. Section 4. People who should not be there. Not every secret in this game floats in the sky or haunts a swamp. Some of the best ones are walking around in plain sight, operating under rules the rest of the world does not seem aware of. Number 34. Francis Sinclair, the Time Traveler. Northwest of Strawberry, in a small cabin outside town, you can find a man named Francis Sinclair, starting in Chapter 2. He stands out immediately, and not in a subtle way. His clothes are wrong for 1899. The belt he wears with belt loops of the kind that did not become common until the 1920s. His speech patterns are wrong. He uses phrases Arthur Morgan has no frame of reference for, colloquial expressions and verbal tics from a different era that make Arthur visibly confused in their interactions. He has a large and distinctive birthmark over his right eye. Sinclair says he is an art collector and that he has lost track of some rock carvings he needs to find. He asks for your help locating them, saying they are scattered across the map. He calls them funny rock carvings and seems genuinely distressed about not having them all. The rock carvings, once you find them, do not depict anything you would expect to find in the American West of 1899. They show skyscrapers, atomic explosions, the double helix of DNA, individuals passing through what appear to be dimensional portals. These are images from the 20th century and beyond, rendered in a medium and style that belongs to an entirely different era, sitting on rock faces in the wilderness as if they have been there for ages. When you have found all 10 and return to Sinclair's cabin, he is gone. In his place is a woman with an infant. She explains her husband died, and only she and the baby are staying at the cabin now. When you get close enough to see the baby's face, it has the same distinctive birthmark as the man you met. The baby is named Francis. The implication is that the man you met was the infant, grown up, having traveled back in time to his own beginning, seeking the rock carvings which he himself had left behind in an earlier iteration of this loop. His business card, which you can examine, shows an hourglass with wings, a symbol of time and travel. On the wall of the cabin is a poster assembled from images that match the rock carvings, a visual diary of travels through different eras. His mother knows who he will become. She seems unbothered by the poster. Some mysteries in this game have the quality of light. The more you look directly at them, the more they shift. Number 35. The Wolfman of Roanoke Valley. Near the river at Roanoke Valley, in the northwestern section of the map, there is a figure who operates by an entirely different set of social conventions than any other human being in the game world. He moves like a wolf. He makes sounds like a wolf. He does not use language in any conventional sense. He is a man who was raised by wolves. The game does not explain his origin beyond what his behavior implies. He was separated from human society early enough, completely enough, that he never developed any of the behaviors that make humans legible to each other. When you approach, he does not address you. He runs back to a cave, and in the cave there are wolves, his family, in the only sense he has ever known the word. If you kill those wolves, he will crouch next to their bodies and simply stay there. He will not run anymore. There is nowhere left to run to. This encounter is one of the most quietly devastating things in the game. There is no quest attached, no reward, just a man whose whole world fits in a cave, and the unsettling knowledge of what happens to that world if you choose wrong. Number 36. the king of the forest. North of Annesburg, at the very northern edge of the playable map, there is a hermit in a tree. He has been there long enough to have constructed himself a situation up in the branches, a degree of installation that suggests permanence. He considers himself the king of the forest. He will tell you this. He will not allow challenge to this claim. This is one of those encounters that exists purely as a piece of color, a small portrait of the kind of eccentric that genuinely populated the edges of American civilization in this period. The frontier attracted people who did not fit anywhere else. Some of them went into politics. Some of them went into religion. Some of them climbed trees and declared sovereignty over whatever they could see from up there. Number 37. The Devil in the Cave, west of Owanjila. There is a cave. Inside the cave is a man. The man claims to be the devil. He does not make this claim in the way a disturbed person might. He makes it with the kind of calm authority that is more unsettling than hysteria would be. He has specific things to say, and if you return every few days, his dialogue develops, adding more to whatever point he is building toward. He does not threaten. He does not ask for anything obvious. He simply sits in his cave and talks, and the things he says accumulate into something that resists easy dismissal. Whether this is a mentally unwell man who has constructed an elaborate identity in isolation, a supernatural entity operating under a very old name, or something else entirely, the game does not adjudicate. The cave is in the game world. The man is in the cave. What he says is in the dialogue files. The rest is up to you. Number 38, the Epsilon Program Connections Grand Theft Auto. Players will recognize the Epsilon Program, the game's parody of Scientology-adjacent celebrity cults, as one of the more extended satirical threads in Rockstar's modern urban setting. Red Dead Redemption 2 has its own tendrils reaching back to that tradition. There are several connections hidden in the game, including a stranger whose birthmark matches a symbol on the Epsilon website from GTA 5, who uses words and concepts Arthur Morgan cannot parse, who seems to exist slightly adjacent to the 1899 world he is standing in. The crossover is never made explicit. It sits in the space between the two games, something for players who know both worlds to find and quietly smile at. Number 39, the Mutant Porch Guitar Player. Somewhere out in the wilderness of the map, there is a man sitting on his porch playing guitar. This would be unremarkable except for what the man looks like. His body bears evidence of severe genetic mutation or experimental alteration that no natural process would produce. He sits there and plays his guitar with the particular contentment of someone who has made peace with his circumstances. If you stare at him for too long, he stops playing, he looks at you, and then he starts shooting. The lesson Rockstar is teaching here is entirely valid and deeply correct for this world. In 1899 America, staring at strangers tends to have consequences. Number 40, the Shawshank Farm. There is a farm in the game world that is laid out to evoke the farm from the Shawshank Redemption's more famous sequences. The composition of the buildings, the specific quality of the light the game uses there, the emotional register of the location all carry the same energy as scenes from the film. Rockstar is not trying to tell you it is a reference. They built it to feel like one and left you to arrive at the connection yourself. Number 41, the Epsilon Cult Revival. Separate from the individual stranger connections, there are locations in the game world that appear to have been used for Epsilon-adjacent ceremonies. Specific arrangements of objects, specific symbology that matches the aesthetic of the in-universe cult, in locations remote enough that they suggest the group has been operating in the wilderness beyond the reach of law or scrutiny. Number 42, the Time Traveler's Business Card. The business card that Francis Sinclair carries when you first meet him is a small physical artifact that contains an enormous amount of information if you look carefully. The hourglass with wings symbol is not just decorative. In the history of symbolism, that specific image carries meaning in several esoteric traditions, and its presence on a card belonging to someone who displays all the behavioral markers of a displaced temporal traveler is either a deliberate deep cut or an extraordinarily suggestive coincidence. Number 43. The French maid in Saint-Denis. In a specific location and at a specific time, you can encounter a woman who claims to be a French maid. She is emphatically not what she claims to be, and the brief interaction reveals an entire small life, operating beneath the surface of what the city's respectable inhabitants see. This is the kind of encounter that passes in a minute and a half, and leaves you thinking about the person for considerably longer. Number 44. The Carolina Parakeet and the Extinction. This is the one on the list that genuinely made people put down their controllers. In the bayou country around La Grasse, you can find the Carolina parakeet. It is a real bird. It was real. The Carolina parakeet was the only parrot species native to eastern North America, a small green and yellow bird that was endemic to the swampy country. This part of the game is modeled on. Red Dead Redemption 2 is set in 1899. The last confirmed wild Carolina parakeet was seen in 1904. The last captive individual died in 1918. Rockstar put the bird in the game in the precise window of time before it went silent forever. And then Rockstar added a mechanic. If you kill 25 of them, you receive a notification informing you that you have personally caused the extinction of the Carolina parakeet. A specific, real, historically documented extinction that you have now completed, early, with your own hands. Your honor rating drops for each one you shoot. The game is judging you. This is one of the most quietly devastating pieces of environmental design in any game ever made. Rockstar put a doomed species in their world, gave you the exact period before it vanished, and let you choose what to do with that. Section 5. Marko Dragic and the God Complex. Some Easter eggs in this game are light touches, glancing references that you catch in a moment and smile at. Others are entire thematic narratives given shape through stranger missions and locations and objects scattered across the map. The Marko Dragic storyline is the second kind, and it reaches further than almost any other secret the game contains. Number 45. Meeting Marko Dragic in St. Denis. Starting in Chapter 4, you can find Marko Dragic in a park on the western edge of St. Denis near the lake. He is demonstrating what he calls his latest invention to a potential investor named Marcel. Before the demonstration begins, another man interrupts and tries to publicly discredit Dragic in front of his investor. Marcel, hedging his bets, agrees to give the invention a chance but insists that someone with no connection to Dragic operate the device, to rule out chicanery. That is where you come in. The invention is a remote-controlled boat. In 1899, a working radio-controlled watercraft would have been an extraordinary technological achievement. Dragic is clearly a genius operating decades ahead of the world he lives in. His hair is wild. His manner is electric with the barely suppressed frustration of someone who sees clearly how things should work and cannot understand why everyone else is so far behind. Number 46. The Nikola Tesla Parallel. The parallels between Marko Dragic and Nikola Tesla are not subtle, but they reward the player who knows enough history to appreciate how specifically they were drawn. Both men are Serbian. Both emigrated to the United States and began working in the field of electrical experimentation around the same period. Tesla arrived in 1884. Dragic's work is set in 1899, at the peak of Tesla's most ambitious period. Dragic's laboratory is modeled directly on the Wardenclyffe Tower facility that Tesla actually built on Long Island, a structure intended to demonstrate wireless transmission of electrical energy across vast distances. Dragic even mentions a silver-tongued American who betrayed him and stole his ideas, a barely disguised reference to Tesla's legendary conflict with Thomas Edison. Tesla died in poverty in 1943 after spending his last years in a hotel room, his most ambitious projects unfunded, and his name overshadowed by Edison's in the public memory. Dragic's end in this game follows a similar trajectory, and the robot he builds before that end is the game's most direct engagement with what Tesla actually believed he was working toward. Tesla genuinely believed in the possibility of a mechanical mind, an artificial consciousness built from electrical principles. He speculated about this publicly and wrote about it with the same clarity he brought to his more practical electrical work. Dragic builds that machine. Number 47. The Dover Hill Laboratory. After meeting Dragic at the lake, he invites Arthur back to his laboratory. Dover Hill sits in the wilderness, a large and imposing structure fitted with lightning rods and electrical conductors that catch and channel the storms this part of the map generates with some regularity. Inside, the lab is a working space of a kind that 1899 America would not have another version of for another decade or two. Dragic is doing things in here that the world around him does not have the framework to evaluate. He needs help with tests. Arthur helps. The tests involve electricity, movement, response, all of them building toward a single outcome, bringing life to the thing Dragic has been building. Number 48. The robot is alive. The machine that Dragic completes with Arthur's help is a robot. A physical, articulated, independently mobile, mechanical figure that Dragic believes can be given something approaching autonomous thought. In the context of 1899, this is not just advanced technology. It is the kind of work that would reshape the entire century that followed. Dragic frames the robot's creation in explicitly paternal terms. He is not making a machine, he is making a son. The language he uses, the care he shows in the robot's design, the emotional investment he has in whether the thing actually works, all mirror the way a parent talks about a child. The robot works. Number 49, Dragic's death, returned to Dover Hill at some point after the laboratory mission, and Marko Dragic is dead. The body is there in the lab, the circumstances suggesting that his end came from a person rather than an accident, that someone found him out there in the wilderness where he was doing impossible things and decided those impossible things should stop. The specific details of his death are not spelled out. The game leaves the scene and lets Arthur's journal entry carry the emotional weight. For a man who was building the future in a present that could not accommodate him, the end is appropriately bleak. Number 50, the robot on the mountain. After finding Dragic's body, go back to the Grizzlies. Go to the snowy high country near the starting area of the game's prologue, near the abandoned mining settlement of Coulter. Climb the mountain. Near the peak, on a ledge overlooking the world below, you will find the robot. It is still running. It is standing in the cold and the wind at the edge of the world, alone on a mountain that almost no one ever climbs, and it says one word: Papa. It says it on a loop, over and over, in a voice that was designed to render the kind of sound a mechanical figure might make when attempting language, and it lands with a force entirely disproportionate to the simplicity of the word. Papa. The robot does not know its father is dead. It does not understand what death means. It only knows that it is here, and that its father built it, and that its father is not here, and so it waits, standing at the top of a mountain in 1899, saying the only word it was given. If you shoot the robot, its arm stops moving, the light in its chest goes dim, but the light in its head remains on. Rockstar kept that light running. Whatever the robot was, it is not entirely gone. Number 51. The Frankenstein parallel, the Dragic storyline, is a deliberate retelling of the Frankenstein myth, and it earns that parallel rather than simply borrowing it. Mary Shelley's novel is about a creator who brings something to life and then abandons it, and the created thing suffers for that abandonment in ways the creator never anticipated. Dragic does not abandon his robot. He is killed, which is different, but no less devastating from the robot's perspective. He had plans for it. He had a future in mind. He was taken from it, and the robot is left alone with nothing but the single word it was given. The twist that makes Dragic's version of this story cut differently than Shelley's is the one the game buries quietly at the end. The robot, standing on its mountain and calling for its father, is more empathetic, more sympathetic, more purely suffering than Frankenstein's monster ever managed to be. It does not rage. It does not seek revenge. It just waits and calls and says its one word into the cold air of the Grizzlies. Number 52. The robot's unique loot. If you interact with the robot, it drops an item called scrap metal. This is unique in that scrap metal from this source is designated differently in the game's inventory than ordinary scrap metal. Whether it has a specific crafting use that has been fully documented, or whether Rockstar built in a unique item tag that never got connected to a recipe, is something that dedicated players have investigated extensively. The item exists. What it is ultimately for may still be open. Number 53, the John Murray Spear connection. The Dragic Wiki entry contains a comparison to a historical figure named John Murray Spear, an American clergyman who genuinely believed, in the mid-19th century, that the spirits of long-dead figures, including Benjamin Franklin and John Quincy Adams, were directing him to create a mechanical messiah. He and his followers built a device they called the New Motive Power in a wooden shed in Massachusetts. The device was meant to be a physical embodiment of divine intelligence. It failed to function. The group disbanded. Dragic stands at the intersection of Tesla's actual science and Spear's spiritual ambition, a character who contains both the legitimate genius and the grandiose theological overreach. The game draws both lines and lets you see where they converge. Section 6. Bones from Before the World You Know, Red Dead Redemption 2 is not just about 1899. The land it builds its world on is ancient, and Rockstar filled it with evidence of everything that happened before the Outlaws and the Railroads and the Pinkertons arrived. Number 54. The Bigfoot skeleton at Mount Shan. Below the letter S in West Elizabeth on the map, Mount Shan rises into the high country. Climb to its peak and find the flat area near the edge where an eagle typically perches. Look left of where the eagle sits and push through the plants there. A path opens into a small cave. Inside the cave is a skeleton. The skeleton is large, significantly large. Arthur draws it in his journal, and his note reads, "Found a massive skeleton. Wonder how big the man was, or if he was a man at all." Rockstar has been putting Bigfoot into their games since the mythology surrounding a Bigfoot Easter egg in Grand Theft Auto. San Andreas became one of the most discussed open-world secrets of its generation. That particular Bigfoot did not actually exist in San Andreas, but the rumor was powerful enough that it shaped how players explored the world for years. Red Dead Redemption 1 had a Sasquatch story in its Undead Nightmare expansion. Red Dead 2 has these bones, Rockstar's most definitive, most physical acknowledgement that something once moved through these mountains that was not quite human. Number 55. The Mammoth Bones. Just north of where Deadboot Creek and Spider Gorge meet in the high snowy country, there are bones. Very large bones. The remains of a creature that has been extinct for roughly 10,000 years, buried in a drift of snow, half covered by the ages. This is actually a historical reference embedded in the game world. The discovery of what is now understood to have been a mammoth tooth in 1705, a 5-pound tooth found in the area that would become New York State, is generally considered the moment that genuinely kicked off the Western world's fascination with fossil evidence and paleontology. Before that discovery, the cultural framework for understanding ancient extinction did not really exist. After it, the question of what enormous things used to walk this land became impossible to stop asking. Rockstar put mammoth bones in the game world to reflect the actual geological history of the land the game is set on. In a game full of secrets that reach toward the impossible and the supernatural, this one reaches toward the very real and very large creatures that actually populated this continent until human beings arrived and the climate changed. Number 56. The Viking Tomb at Roanoke Ridge. West of Deer Cottage and Roanoke Ridge, there is a tomb. It is sunken into the earth in the way very old things sink, the ground gradually reclaiming what was built in it. And if you find the entry and descend, you are looking at something that does not belong in America in any period that history formally acknowledges. The artifacts inside the tomb are Norse, a Viking hatchet, an ancient Viking comb. The engravings and construction techniques belong to a tradition that predates European settlement of the Americas by centuries, placing genuine Norse exploration of the continent in the game world as an established historical fact rather than a speculative theory. Leif Erikson and the Norse settlers at what is now Lons All Meadows in Newfoundland reached North America around 1000 AD. Whether Norse exploration extended further inland, down the eastern coastline, into territories that would later become the United States, is a matter of ongoing historical debate. Red Dead 2 takes a quiet position on that debate. There is a Viking tomb in the wilderness of New Hanover, and it has been there long enough to be half buried by time. Number 57. The Crashed Flying Machine in Icarus. In the woods of Big Valley, there is a wreck, a primitive flying machine of the kind that people were genuinely attempting to build and fly in the years just before the Wright brothers succeeded in 1903. The machine crashed badly, and the body of its pilot is still there with it. Arthur's journal entry about this discovery is one of the most poetic things in the game. Found the wreckage of a flying machine in the woods. Some would-be Icarus, dead with his dreams. The Icarus reference does not need explanation for most readers, but carries significant emotional weight in context. Icarus was the boy who flew too close to the sun on wings of wax and feathers and fell into the sea when the wax melted. He is the symbol of ambition that overreaches the limits of the tools available to it. This unnamed pilot in the Big Valley woods died reaching for the same thing the Wright brothers would achieve just a few years later. He was not wrong. He was early. A second crash site exists west of Armadillo in New Austin. This one belonged to a man named Charles Kinnear, whose name is printed on the tail of the machine. Kinnear is a returning reference from the original Red Dead Redemption, where you helped him conduct a flying test. The note in RDR2 says he survived this particular crash. In the first game, he was not so fortunate. Number 58. The whale bones west of Awangila. On a hillside that now sits well above any waterline, there are whale bones. They are simply there, half covered by the land that has grown over and around them over whatever span of time it took for this hillside to rise above the sea, sitting in the grass as evidence that the world this game is set in looked dramatically different once. Whale bones on a hillside in Western America are not scientifically impossible. The continent's geological history includes periods when significant portions of the interior were covered by shallow seas. Finding whale bones in Kansas or Montana is something that actually happens in the real world, and has been happening since humans started digging into the ground. Rockstar put them in the hills of their frontier and asked nothing of you in exchange. They are just there, enormous and quiet, speaking across millions of years. Number 59, the dinosaur bone collectibles. Scattered across the full map of the game, there are 30 dinosaur bones to find. They are the collectibles associated with a paleontologist stranger mission, which you can begin by finding the first bone and examining it. The bones range from small fossilized fragments to impressive skeletal pieces partially embedded in cliff faces and canyon walls. The real-world equivalent of this activity was actually happening in the American West during this exact period. The late 19th century was the era of the Bone Wars, an infamous competitive feud between two paleontologists, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, who spent decades racing each other to discover, excavate, and name as many new dinosaur species as possible. Their rivalry was so intense and so petty that they sabotaged each other's dig sites, bribed each other's workers, and published rushed and error-filled descriptions of new species in order to get their names on the discoveries first. The game set in 1899 hides dinosaur bones across its landscape during the exact decade when American paleontology was at its most ferociously contested. That is not a coincidence. Number 60, the Sunken Civil War, Fort Head east of Emerald Station to Fort Brennan near the Kamasa River. The fort is abandoned and partially deteriorating, a remnant of the Civil War that ended 34 years before the game begins. Inside the only standing cabin, then down to the basement, you find a chest. In the chest is a Civil War report, which explains the final events that unfolded in this specific fortification, what decisions were made, what the consequences were, and why no one is here anymore. There is also a Civil War knife, an actual weapon from the period that you can carry for the rest of the game. Number 61, the ancient petroglyphs. Beyond Francis Sinclair's time-traveling rock carvings, there are petroglyphs on various rock faces throughout the game world that belong to genuinely ancient traditions, placed there by the indigenous peoples whose land this was before any of the game's named characters were born. Most players ride past them. They are not collectibles. They are not part of any quest chain. They are just evidence of the people who were here first, written into the rock in a language that the game's European-descended characters cannot read. Number 62. The Blackwater Aztec symbols on the walls and rooftops of Blackwater and West Elizabeth. Rockstar embedded a series of Aztec symbols. As John in the epilogue, you can notice and record these, and if you translate them, the combined message reads, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Ayotl is the Aztec goddess of fog, haze, and nighttime damp, a deity of obscured vision and the liminal space between light and darkness. Whether Rockstar was making a comment on Blackwater specifically, on the nature of the game's world, or simply embedding a beautiful piece of cryptographic texture design is left open. Section 7. The World Outside the World. Red Dead Redemption 2 is set in its own universe, but Rockstar's developers grew up in the real one, and the game is full of places where the world of 1899 fiction is transparently in conversation with the world outside it. Number 63. The Revenant Bear Scene. In the northwestern section of Big Valley, near Hanging Dog Ranch, there is a tableau, a grizzly bear, dead, lying on top of a human body. The human managed to kill the bear. You can find the knife still in the animal. It is not hard to see, looking at the evidence, that this was a fight neither participant survived. The scene is an homage to the most famous moment in Alejandro González Iñárritu's 2015 film, The Revenant, in which Leonardo DiCaprio's character Hugh Glass is attacked by a grizzly in an extended sequence that became one of the most discussed pieces of filmmaking of its decade. The film was itself based on the true story of Hugh Glass, a real fur trapper who actually survived a bear attack in 1823, and then trekked hundreds of miles injured and alone to find the men who had left him for dead. Red Dead Redemption 2 adds its own version of the story, and does something quietly different with it. Both combatants die. The bear does not walk away. The hunter does not walk away. The frontier does not reward the dramatic survival of the fittest. Sometimes it just ends. Number 64. The Jungle Book, Snake Near the O in Lemoyne. On the map, if you ride west of La Grasse and look up into the trees, you will find an enormous orange snake draped across the branches. It is dead, or at least motionless, hanging there in the canopy at a scale that no real snake in North America would reach. The size and the coloring are specifically designed to evoke Kaa, the giant python from Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, the same sinuous, ancient, languorous predator who could hypnotize with a look. Just south of where the snake hangs, interestingly, is the abandoned settlement of Pleasance. Whether the proximity to that particular nightmare is intentional, or whether they simply ended up near each other on the map, is unclear. Number 65. The Hobbit Hole. East of Donner Falls and Bacchus Bridge, in the northeastern corner of the map up in the Amberino hinterlands, there is a structure built into a hillside. Round door, earth-banked walls, the architectural grammar of a home designed to blend with the landscape rather than impose on it. It looks exactly like Bilbo Baggins's home at Bag End, as it appears in Peter Jackson's film adaptations of The Lord of the Rings. Arthur can go inside. His journal entry wonders who might have built it and what purpose it served, and he speculates, in his direct and somewhat literal way, that it might have been constructed by a Native American community as some kind of shelter. He is clearly missing the reference, which feels right. Arthur Morgan is not a man who has read much Tolkien. Number 66. The South Park Man-Bear-Pig west of Van Horn Trading Post. There is a small building. Inside the building is a taxidermied creation that should not exist. A combination of parts from different animal species, assembled with apparent care and considerable skill, into something that is recognizable to anyone who has watched South Park as the Man-Bear-Pig, the mythological creature championed by Al Gore in multiple episodes of that series as the greatest threat facing humanity. In the game, it is labeled the man-made mutant. It has wings, which the South Park Man-Bear-Pig does not technically have. Whoever the taxidermist was, they were an innovator. Number 67, the bully Easter egg on a knife. Red Dead Redemption 2 hides a reference to Rockstar's 2006 game Bully in a somewhat unlikely place. At the end of the gunslinger's questline, you obtain a distinctive knife. Etched into the blade is the Latin phrase Canis Canem Edit, which means dog eats dog, and which was the working title of Bully, the school set game that became one of Rockstar's most beloved and consistently requested sequels. The phrase sits on the blade of a weapon in a Western game released 12 years after Bully, which is either a very obscure piece of fan service or a piece of fan service so obscure it doubles back around to being charming. Number 68. The Walking Dead plague town of Pleasance. East of Blue Water Marsh in Lemoyne, there is a town called Pleasance. It was established in August 1883, and the game is set in 1899, which means Pleasance is only 16 years old. The cemetery tells the immediate story. All 10 of its graves contain people who died within 1 month of the town's founding, killed by everything from gunshot to knife to means the records describe only as plague. The barn at the edge of town has "Stay Out Plague" painted on its locked doors in letters large enough to read from a distance. Another building has "Ill with Sin" written on it in a register that suggests either extreme religious conviction or a public health authority working with very limited communication options. The construction references the first season of The Walking Dead, specifically the episode set on Herschel's farm, with a secondary nod to the opening of the show's first season involving a hospital and a barn. The detail that makes this more than a simple visual quote is the graveyard. All those deaths concentrated into a single month in a town barely older than the people who died in it. Whatever was in that barn claimed everything Pleasance ever had before it could become what it was supposed to be. Number 69. The Herschel Farm reference. There is a specific farm elsewhere on the map whose layout and the composition of its buildings evoke Herschel Green's farm from The Walking Dead more directly than Pleasance does. Players who watch the second season of the show will likely recognize the structure before they consciously register that they are seeing a reference. The visual shorthand is accurate enough to the specific filming location that it passes from homage into something that feels almost like a memory. Number 70, the Jeremiah Johnson bear hat. The legendary bear hat available in the game is based on the headwear worn by Robert Redford in the 1972 film Jeremiah Johnson, a revisionist western based on the life of real mountain man John Garrison Johnson. Getting the hat in the game requires surviving the kind of close encounters with grizzly bears that the film depicts with a mixture of romance and documentary brutality. Rockstar made the reference physically interactive. To wear the hat, you have to earn it the same way the character in the film did. Number 71. Hosea Matthews and Clint Eastwood, longtime Van der Linde gang member. Hosea Matthews, one of Arthur's mentors and one of the most genuinely likable characters in the game's ensemble, bears a resemblance to Clint Eastwood that players noted early in the game's life. The connection deepens with examination. Hosea's manner, his particular combination of warmth and pragmatic cynicism, his role in the gang as the con man with a conscience, all evoke the specific Eastwood characters of the spaghetti western era. The good, the bad, and the ugly. A fistful of dollars, the man with no name. Those characters occupy a particular place in the mythology of the genre this game is playing in, and Hosea feels like an affectionate embodiment of what Eastwood brought to them. Number 72, the Hatchet Jack reference. In the high country there is a frozen man. He died outside in the cold, holding his gun, and the cold preserved him there in the posture of his last moment. His name and the specific nature of his end reference, Hatchet Jack, a character mentioned in the 1972 film Jeremiah Johnson, a mountain man whose frozen body and last written testament served as a minor but resonant plot point in the film. Rockstar built the scene with enough visual specificity that the reference is clear, while keeping it obscure enough that it rewards the player who has actually seen the film and remembers the scene being described. Section 8. The darkness in the details. Not every hidden thing in Red Dead Redemption 2 is funny or affectionate or rooted in pop culture. Some of them are there because Rockstar wanted to build a world that contained the full spectrum of what the American frontier was, including the things that are uncomfortable to sit with. Number 73. The Serial Killer's Trophy Trail. This is one of the most extended and carefully constructed mystery sequences in the game, and it begins with something most players notice in their first few hours without registering its significance. Near Valentine, underneath a train track bridge, there is a dead body strung up. It is arranged, not fallen. Someone placed it there. The body is the first clue in a chain called Look Upon My Works, a reference to Shelley's Ozymandias, the poem about the king who built monuments to his own greatness and found that time erases everything. There are 3 clue sites total. Each one requires you to find a piece of a map. The map pieces, when assembled, lead you to a cabin west of Valentine, where the killer has been working for some time. The scene inside the cabin is one of the few moments in the game where Rockstar did not soften what they were depicting. The documented real-world inspirations for the fictional serial killer include Albert Fish, one of the most disturbing figures in American criminal history, active from the 1920s into the 1930s, and Stephen D. Richards, known as the Nebraska Fiend, active in the 1870s. The killer in the game operates in the territory between those 2 historical figures, a composite portrait that belongs to the specific tradition of American Gothic violence that the frontier era both produced and denied. What is disturbing about the cabin is not just the contents but the care. Someone lived here. Someone organized this space and maintained it, and returned to it regularly and felt, in this cabin, at home. The same territory that contains Arthur Morgan and his complicated moral accounting contains this. In the same trees, under the same sky. The game does not give you a villain speech or a proper confrontation. The cabin is simply there, with its evidence, and you can piece together the story from the physical space if you are willing to look at it. This is environmental storytelling at its most uncompromising, built for the player who wants the full scope of what this world contains, rather than just the parts that are comfortable. Number 74. Gertrude Braithwaite. At the Braithwaite estate, behind the manor, in the woods, there is a locked outhouse, chained and padlocked. The chain and padlock are substantial, the kind of fastening you put on something you do not want getting out, rather than the kind you put on something you want to prevent people from accessing. From inside the outhouse, a voice, a woman's voice, not entirely coherent, calling out as Arthur passes. She is alive. She has been there a very long time. Gertrude Braithwaite was born to the family with some kind of disability or neurodivergent condition. The Braithwaites, who are presented throughout the game as a prude and socially ambitious family, could not accommodate a member who did not fit their self-image, so they chained her in an outhouse and left her there. If you return to the Braithwaite estate as John in the epilogue, after the family's destruction in the main story, Gertrude is still in the outhouse. But she is not calling out anymore. She is not calling out because she is no longer alive. There was no one left to tend to her after the family fell apart, and she starved. The game tells this story entirely through an outhouse, a chain, and 2 visits separated by several chapters and years. Number 75. The escaped slave who did not make it near Shady Bell. Washed up on the bank of the water, there is a man who died close to where he was trying to go. He is shackled. The shackles explain everything about where he came from and the decade or so before the game begins. The game is set in 1899, 34 years after the end of the Civil War and the formal abolition of slavery, but the forms of servitude and control that slavery relied on did not simply stop in 1865. Reconstruction ended. Jim Crow began. The shackles that this man died in are not anachronistic. Rockstar placed him there without commentary. He is not a side mission. He is not a collectible. He is just a man who died trying to get somewhere, close enough to the water that it almost looks like an accident, but the shackles tell you it was not. Number 76, the Bear Trap Cabin. Somewhere on the map, there is a small cabin that appears ordinary from the outside. You enter through the door, which opens normally. Inside, before you can register what is happening, a bear attacks. It is confined in the small space, but there is no way to avoid it and no time to prepare. It is the game's most effective pure jump scare moment, delivered entirely through environmental design. After the initial shock, you notice the cabin also contains items that gang members had been requesting from Arthur. The bear was not there by accident. Number 77. The Moonshine Operation in Strawberry. In the general store in Strawberry, there is a basement. Getting to it requires a specific sequence. First, you must find and investigate the window at the back of the building and see the operation inside. Then, when you enter through the front, you have the option to rob the place rather than simply shop there. The storekeeper will escort you downstairs. The basement is a working moonshine distillery. In 1899, this is not illegal the way it would become during Prohibition in 1920, but it is emphatically not the kind of thing a legitimate general store would want as its subterranean feature. The full loot run through that basement, if you execute it properly, is one of the more satisfying small heists in the game. Number 78, the Shawshank Redemption scene. The specific location in the game world that evokes the famous Rockhammer scene from the Shawshank Redemption is built with enough compositional precision that it stops feeling like coincidence very quickly. The light. The specific physical relationship between the elements of the environment, the quality of stillness the game gives the space. It is a moment of pure cinematic love built into a game world, a development team's way of saying that this film mattered to the people who made this game. Number 79, the Aztec symbol, translation. Returning to the Aztec symbols scattered across Blackwater. The full translation of the message, when all symbols are collected and decoded, is, "Blessed are the peacemakers." The phrase is from the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Placing a biblical peace blessing in Aztec script on the walls of a town named Blackwater, the site of the massacre that haunts the entire game's backstory, is either a sardonic joke or a genuine piece of emotional resonance. And the game is good enough that both readings work simultaneously. Number 80, the Roanoke Valley Mystery. Roanoke Ridge and Roanoke Valley in the New Hanover region of the map are named for the lost colony of Roanoke, the 16th century English settlement that disappeared from the coast of what is now North Carolina, leaving behind nothing but the carved word Croatoan and one of American history's most persistent unsolved mysteries. 115 people vanished, with no confirmed explanation. The game placed its Roanoke Valley in a region that itself has a tendency toward the strange and the unexplained. The serial killer operates there. The Wolfman lives near there. Ancient things have been found buried in it. Whether Rockstar is building a case that this stretch of digital wilderness is particularly haunted, or whether the name is simply an affectionate historical reference, is a question you can spend a long time productively not answering. Number 81, The Donner Party connection, Donner Falls and Bacchus Bridge, two landmarks in the game's northeastern region, are named in reference to the Donner Party, a group of American settlers who departed for California in 1846 and became stranded by early snowfall in the Sierra Nevada. Of the 87 members of the party, 48 survived the winter. They survived partly through means that the survivors spent the rest of their lives not speaking about directly. The campfire story that gang members tell about a similar event in the game world draws directly on this history. The frontier of the game is geographically consistent with the general route the Donner Party would have taken, and naming specific features of the landscape after that event anchors the fictional world to one of the most genuinely harrowing episodes in American westward expansion. Number 82, the Night Folk's strategy. We touched on the Night Folk earlier, but their tactical sophistication warrants its own number. They are the only faction in the game that will actively target your horse before targeting you. The design logic behind this is worth sitting with. Your horse in Red Dead 2 is not just a vehicle, it is a companion, a partner, something you have invested time and care and attachment in. The Night Folk know this. They go for the horse. In terms of game design, targeting the horse is an act of psychological warfare. In terms of the game world's internal logic, it suggests an intelligence about human vulnerability that is more unsettling than simple aggression. They understand what hurts. Section 9. What Arthur wrote down. The journal that Arthur Morgan carries throughout the game is one of the most extraordinary details in Red Dead Redemption 2, and most players never read more than a handful of entries. This section is about what you find when you actually read it. Number 83. Arthur's drawing style. Arthur Morgan is an outlaw. He is also, evidently, a gifted illustrator. His journal drawings are detailed, compositionally considered, and executed with a skill that feels inconsistent with how he presents himself to the world. The men and women he draws are rendered with genuine observational care. The landscapes are atmospheric. The animals he sketches for study entries show a naturalist's eye for form and proportion. John Marston, when he takes over the journal in the epilogue, draws more simply. His renderings are serviceable, but clearly the work of a man who never spent much time developing the skill. The contrast is there without announcement, another piece of character work Rockstar did through a mechanic most players barely engaged with. This contrast reveals something Rockstar is saying about both men. Arthur is thoughtful in ways he rarely shows the world. He has a private life in those journal pages that does not match the weathered, pragmatic face he presents to Dutch and the gang. The drawing suggests someone who looked at the world closely and found it worth recording. The way he sketches a hawk or an elk or a mountain range carries the quality of someone for whom the physical world has always been a source of something that the human world around him has not been reliable in providing. Beauty, maybe. Stillness. The indifference of nature to human problems, which when you are living Arthur Morgan's life, is not an insult but a relief. John draws like a man who is still figuring out how to be the person the game is asking him to become. His journal is a man learning to articulate things he was never taught to articulate. The writing is simpler than Arthur's. The drawings are rougher, but there is something genuine in John's journal too, a different kind of presence, someone starting to understand his own life in real time, rather than having spent years developing the tools to do so. Number 84. The New Austin drawings that should not exist. If you use exploits or mods to bring Arthur into New Austin before the game's story allows it, his journal will generate unique drawings and entries for the locations there. Not John's entries. Arthur's, with Arthur's better drawing style, and Arthur's different way of processing what he sees. The existence of these inaccessible journal entries strongly suggests that at some point during development, New Austin was meant to be playable as Arthur. The story of the Blackwater Massacre, which hangs over the entire game as the event that made New Austin too dangerous for Arthur to enter, might have been planned as a prologue sequence the player would actually play through rather than simply learn about through dialogue and documents. The entries were built, the locations were built, the route through them was apparently planned, and then at some point, for reasons that may have been developmental time, story considerations, or something else entirely, it was cut. The journal entries remain, accessible only through means the game was not designed to permit, waiting in the code for the version of the game they were made for. What we have in those inaccessible pages is something rare in game development, evidence of the road not taken, preserved in the final product by the particular way that large games are constructed. Nobody cleaned those files out. They were simply left behind the locked door of a storyline that never made it to release, in a world otherwise accessible only to John Marston. Arthur's handwriting on a page describing New Austin is the ghost of a game that almost existed alongside the one you played. Number 85. Arthur's thoughts on the Bigfoot skeleton. Arthur's journal entry for the Bigfoot skeleton at Mount Shan is one of the better pieces of writing in the game's note-taking system. He draws the skeleton in reasonable detail. He writes, "Found a massive skeleton. Wonder how big the man was, or if he was a man at all." That last phrase, "or if he was a man at all," does exactly what the best uncertainty in fiction does. It opens a door without walking through it. Arthur does not commit to the supernatural explanation. He does not dismiss it. He notes the size and the shape, and then asks the obvious question and leaves it hanging. Number 86. Arthur's entry for the crashed flying machine. "Some would be Icarus, dead with his dreams." This is Arthur quoting classical mythology in his journal, unprompted, in a way that suggests someone in his past gave him access to stories beyond the frontier. Who taught Arthur about Icarus? The game never says, but the reference sits in his journal in his handwriting, evidence of a broader inner life than the world around him generally gives him credit for. Number 87. The honor system's effect on journal tone. Arthur's journal entries shift in tone depending on his honor level. High honor. Arthur writes with more reflection, more emotional openness, more willingness to sit with uncertainty and examine his own behavior. Low honor, Arthur writes with a harder edge, more dismissiveness, less willingness to dwell. The journal entries for the same events are different depending on what kind of man Arthur has been. This means the journal is not just a record of the game's events. It is a record of who Arthur was while those events were happening, and two playthroughs on opposite ends of the honor scale will produce genuinely different documents. Number 88. Trelawney's Secret in Saint Denis. If you climb to the upper floors of specific buildings in Saint Denis, near the area north of the doctor's office, you can position Arthur to hear a conversation between Josiah Trelawney, the gang's associate and occasional member, and his wife. Trelawney has been evasive about his personal life throughout the game, keeping it deliberately separate from his professional entanglements with Dutch's gang. Hearing this conversation unlocks a secret dialogue back at camp that fills in some of the specifics he has been withholding. It is optional. The game does not tell you it is there. Trelawney is not in the main cast in a way that would make most players look for his hidden backstory, but it is there for anyone who climbs the right building at the right time. Number 89. Arthur's illness journal entries. When Arthur receives his tuberculosis diagnosis partway through the game, the journal changes. The entries become more reflective in a way that is distinct from the honor-based tone shifts. He starts to use the journal differently, less as a record and more as a place to process things that do not have any other outlet. The drawings in this section become more personal, less documentary. There are entries about Hosea, about Dutch, about what the gang was when he first joined it and what it became, about Mary. There are entries that do not connect to any specific game event, that seem to come from a man sitting alone somewhere and trying to figure out what his life has meant. Players who read these entries in full describe the experience of doing so as significantly more affecting than the scenes those entries emerge from, which is an interesting inversion of the usual relationship between cutscene and ambient detail. Number 90, the camp cutscene for complaining too much. There is a hidden cutscene you can trigger by annoying your camp companions repeatedly. The specific mechanic involves returning to camp and engaging in a behavior that the other gang members find irritating enough, often enough, that they eventually collectively decide to address it. The resulting cutscene is brief and deeply funny, a moment of community feedback that exists entirely outside the main story and rewards players who spent time actually hanging around the camp between missions. It is a piece of the game that only exists because Rockstar's writers decided that Dutch's camp should feel like a real community with actual social dynamics, and real communities have a limit to their tolerance. Number 91. Arthur's letter to Mary in the journal. At a certain point in Arthur's arc, there are journal entries that function as letters he is writing in his head to Mary Linton, the woman he loved and did not end up with. He does not send them. They exist only in his journal, internal documents of a relationship that the game treats with more quiet sadness than it does with drama. Reading them in full is not required to complete the game, to reach 100%, or to unlock any reward. They are there for the same reason the real version of these entries would be there, because a person in that situation would write them, and because they would not send them. Section 10. The strangest and the rarest. The final section of this list is for the things that are hardest to categorize, hardest to find, and in some cases hardest to explain even after you have found them. Number 92. Gertrude's number sequence. When Gertrude Braithwaite calls out from the locked outhouse as Arthur passes, the sounds she makes are not entirely random. Players with exceptional audio sensitivity and patience have parsed those sounds into a sequence of numbers. That sequence reappears in GTA Online, specifically in the fortune-telling machine at the arcade, where the Madame Nazar character recites the same numbers. Calling the number sequence in GTA Online connects to a phone call from Madame Nazar herself. The development teams for these two games built a cross-game cryptic connection through the sounds of a woman locked in an outhouse in 1899. This is either the most elaborate piece of environmental storytelling in Rockstar's history or a remarkable coincidence. Given Rockstar's track record, apply your own judgment. Number 93, the parakeet extinction. Notification, we covered this earlier, but it bears returning to in full. When you kill your 25th Carolina parakeet, the game sends you a specific in-game notification. It does not say you have completed a challenge, it says you have caused the extinction of the Carolina parakeet. You, personally, not a faction you fought or a natural disaster you witnessed. You. The honor drop is automatic with each kill. Rockstar programmed the game to judge you for doing this. The bird is there in the world, beautiful and small and doomed regardless of what you do, and Rockstar made sure that if you were the one who ended it, you would know exactly what you had done. Number 94. The rare white stallion of the mountains. In the high country near Lake Isabella in the Grizzlies, there is a white Arabian horse. Horses in this game are individuals with distinct personalities and capabilities, and the white Arabian is among the best horses available, with handling and speed that most horses cannot match. But finding and taming her requires patience and approach of a specific kind. Riding hard at her will make her bolt, and she will lose you in the mountains. You have to come to her slowly, read her reactions, give her time to understand that you are not a threat. Players who successfully tame her describe the process as one of the most memorable moments in the game. There is no quest. There is no waypoint. There is just a horse standing in the snow at the edge of a frozen lake, visible if you ride to the right place and look. Number 95. The lightning strike fatality, the rarest spontaneous event in Red Dead Redemption 2, is not any of the supernatural encounters or the legendary animal sightings. It is getting struck by lightning. The game's weather system is dynamic and procedural, generating storms that move across the map with genuine meteorological behavior. During those storms, lightning strikes occur, and on a small but non-zero probability, one of those lightning strikes can hit your character. The death animation is unique. It is not shared with any other cause of death in the game. Rockstar built a specific animation for an event that might happen to any given player only once in 100 hours of gameplay, or might never happen at all. They made it anyway. Yeah, number 96, the giant snake's unexplained death. The enormous snake in the trees near the O in Lemoyne, the one that evokes Ka from the Jungle Book, is dead. It has been dead for some time when you find it. Whatever killed it, and whatever a snake of that size was doing in that tree in the first place, the game offers no explanation for either question. It is simply there, enormous and inexplicable, draped over the branches of a tree near an abandoned plague town. The proximity to Pleasance, where whatever was in that barn killed everyone in the settlement within a month of its founding, suggests without confirming that there may be a connection. Whether the snake was what was in the barn, whether it is what killed the people of Pleasance, or whether it is simply a large dead snake that happened to die near a large dead town, the game leaves entirely to your imagination. There is no journal entry for the snake. Arthur does not sketch it and write 2 careful paragraphs about what he thinks happened. He sees it and moves on, which is its own kind of answer to the question of what it means. Some things in the frontier are so far outside the normal that even a man who has seen most of what this world offers does not have a framework to process them. He notes the scale of the thing in passing and keeps riding, the snake is very large. Whether it belongs to a living population somewhere in the bayou, or whether it is genuinely the last of its kind, alone in those trees and simply too big and too old to have a natural predator capable of ending it, is another question the game poses and does not answer. But it is dead now. Whatever it was, the swamp outlasted it, the same way the swamp outlasts everything. Number 97. The Shack with the Dream Machine. There is a remote shack somewhere in the wilderness that contains an unusual concentration of strange equipment, brewing apparatus, and written notes describing experiments the author seems to have been conducting on themselves. The liquid in the vessel is drinkable. The consequences of drinking it are the kind of consequences that make you understand, while experiencing them, that some things in this world should probably be left alone. Arthur's reaction to the experience is visible in his face and movements before consciousness returns to normal. The game does not give you a loading screen or a cutscene. It gives you the experience as something that happens to Arthur, something you are along for rather than watching from the outside. When he wakes up in a different place, disoriented and blinking, there is a quality to the moment that does not quite feel like the rest of the game, like the world briefly allowed something through that it does not normally permit. The shack itself, on subsequent visits, is unchanged. The equipment is still there. The notes are still there. Whoever lived there is not, and was apparently not there when Arthur arrived either. Just the equipment and the records of someone's long, patient, self-directed investigation into what this particular liquid does to a human mind. The notes suggest they considered the results promising. Number 98. The King Hermit's Domain. The hermit in the tree north of Annesburg, who considers himself the king of the forest, will, if you return multiple times and push his patience, provide additional dialogue that elaborates on his particular kingdom. He has a consistent internal logic. His sovereignty has rules. He does not enforce them violently, but he will make clear when you are in violation of them. There is a version of this man's life, somewhere upstream of the moment you find him in a tree. That would be interesting to know. What does a person who ends up in a tree declaring himself a king of forests look like in his 20s? What decisions got him here? The game does not ask or answer these questions. It simply provides the tree, the man, and the crown he has given himself, and lets you decide whether to find it funny or sad or both simultaneously. What the king of the forest represents in the broader context of the game's world is worth sitting with for a moment. Red Dead Redemption 2 is set at the closing edge of one particular kind of American life, the period when the frontier as a real, functioning geographic concept was ending. The railroads had connected the continent. The law was catching up to the last holdouts of the outlaw era. The open land that had allowed Dutch's gang to exist, to move and operate and imagine themselves beyond consequence, was contracting. The king of the forest is a man who looked at that contraction and found his own solution. Climb high enough above it and declare sovereignty over whatever you can see. He has no state, no recognition, no subjects, just a tree and the word king, which he has decided to apply to himself because nobody has told him he cannot. He is not wrong, exactly. He is simply working from a definition of kingship that no one else in the game world is using. Number 99. The moon cycle's effect on the game world. The moon in Red Dead Redemption. 2 cycles through its phases on a schedule that is accurate to the historical period the game represents. Full moons affect how much light there is at night, which affects both your visibility and the behavior of animals. Wolves are notably more active and more aggressive under a full moon. Some supernatural encounters are conditional on the moon phase. The night folk are harder to see on dark nights and slightly more visible under the full moon, which does not make them less dangerous and may actually make them more so. Most players never consciously track the lunar cycle, but it is running underneath the entire game, a hidden variable in hundreds of interactions that players have without knowing the moon is part of the calculation. When you have a particularly brutal encounter with wolves on a night that seem no different from any other, when the night folk seem more present and aggressive than usual, when your horse is skittish for reasons you cannot identify, there is a decent chance the moon phase is part of the answer. The historical period the game is set in took the moon seriously in practical terms. Agricultural schedules, hunting patterns, travel decisions, all factored in the lunar cycle in ways that modern life has largely made irrelevant. Rockstar built the moon into their simulation and then did not tell you they had done it, because the point was not for you to know. The point was for the world to feel like it had its own cycles, that you were living inside rather than controlling. The moon does not care when you want to play. It moves on its own schedule. Number 100, The Strange Man in the Mirror. We end where we have to end, with the only encounter in the game that Rockstar specifically designed to be missed by the vast majority of players, that rewards nothing when you find it, that leaves every question it raises without answer, and that has been discussed more than almost any other secret in the game's 7 years of being played and studied and dissected. Go to the cabin at Bile Edge. Visit it enough times, enough days apart, to watch the painting develop toward completion. Look into the mirror. He is there, for a fraction of a second. The strange man, the figure who haunted the first game and has left traces everywhere in the second, is visible in the reflection of a mirror in a cabin that belongs to him in a world he moves through invisibly. He is looking at you, not at Arthur, at you through the screen, in the same way a figure in a painting will sometimes seem to follow your eyes across a room. He is there, and then he is gone, and the painting is complete, and the cabin is empty, and the swamp outside is quiet. He was never not there. That is probably the point. Consider everything this Easter egg required Rockstar to build and to believe about their players. They had to write the character in the first game, build his mythology across multiple appearances, leave him deliberately unresolved. They had to carry that unresolved thread into the sequel. They had to build a cabin in a remote location, fill it with cryptic references, program a painting that develops over multiple real-time visits spanning many in-game days. They had to design and implement a mirror reflection that activates for less than a second at the exact moment when the painting's development is complete, triggered by a visit to a specific location that was not required for any quest. They had to believe that someone would find the cabin, that they would come back enough times to watch the painting develop, that they would think to look in the mirror, and then they had to be willing to give that player nothing for their effort except the thing itself. No achievement, no reward, no cutscene to explain what they saw, just the face in the mirror and the question it carries. Who is he? What does he want? Why is his painting in the cabin completing itself in the years after the events of both games? Why does he appear in the mirror at the moment of the painting's completion, as if the two things are connected, as if completing the picture of him in that space is what allows him to briefly be present in that space? The answer to every one of those questions is, Rockstar does not know either. They said so, which means they built a mystery that they did not have an answer for, hid it in a corner of their world that most players would never find, and left it there for whoever was patient enough to look. Not because they had something to say with it, because some things are more interesting as questions than they would ever be as answers. That is the final Easter egg, not the thing in the mirror. The fact that the mirror is there, and that is 100. 100 secrets, Easter eggs, hidden encounters, and quiet mysteries embedded in the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. If you made it this far, whether you rode through all 100 in a single sitting, or you drifted in and out while the night got later around you, thank you for being here. There are games that are entertainment, and then there are games that are places. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a place, and the people who built it cared about every inch of it, down to the bird they put there to be extinct, down to the painting that finishes itself when you are not watching, down to the robot on the mountain that says one word into the cold and does not understand why no one answers. You can spend 1,000 hours in this game and still be surprised by it. You can know where every secret is located and still feel the world as a living thing when you ride through it. That is what genuine craft produces, a world that does not run out. There are things we did not cover tonight. The stone face on the side of the mountain north of Moonstone Pond, the dead man and the sheep on the farm in New Hanover, the Civil War field hospital with its full documentation of a single terrible night, the bottle tree in the swamp, the escaped magician in the box in the river, the mermaid carved into a rock in a cave, every treasure map, every legendary animal, every last letter tucked into a dead man's coat. We could keep writing for another 100. If any of tonight's entries made you want to go looking, drop a comment telling us which one you are after first. And if you found something we did not cover, share it below. This community has been finding new things in this game since 2018 and shows no sign of stopping. Every new discovery is another reason to saddle up and go back in. Hit that like button if you stayed with us through the night. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next ride. And we will see you out there on the frontier, ride safe. A final note on what makes this world different. There is a conversation worth having about why Red Dead Redemption 2 contains more meaningful secrets per square mile than almost any other open-world game ever made, and it comes back to one decision Rockstar made early in development that most game studios would not have made. They decided that the secrets would not explain themselves. Most games with hidden content operate on a reward loop. You find the thing. The thing gives you a notification. The notification tells you what the thing was and what you get for finding it. You are rewarded with an item, or an achievement, or a story beat, or at minimum a checkpoint on a collectible list that tells you how many you have found so far. The secret is designed to be completed, and completion is designed to feel satisfying. Red Dead Redemption 2 operates differently in significant ways. Agnes Dowd does not trigger a quest. She does not give you a reward. Visiting her all 16 times produces only the accumulated fragments of a story Rockstar trusted you to care about on its own terms. The Strange Man's painting does not unlock a cutscene when it finishes. The Wolfman does not lead to a resolution. The robot on the mountain says one word and continues saying it indefinitely, waiting for a father who will never come, and there is no way to change that outcome. The game built these moments and then declined to make them transactions. This means that the secrets in Red Dead Redemption 2 are not really secrets in the traditional gaming sense. They are closer to the kind of things you stumble across in real landscapes: the abandoned house at the edge of a field, the unfamiliar grave in a churchyard, the old newspaper folded inside a wall during a renovation. These things have histories that you cannot fully access. They reward curiosity without satisfying it completely. You know something happened here. You know there was a person or people, and that something mattered to them. You do not know everything, and you will not find out everything, and the world does not particularly care whether you are comfortable with that. Arthur Morgan's response to the things he finds is also worth sitting with for a moment. He sketches them. He writes brief notes. He does not perform his reactions for the player. He processes discoveries in the private space of his journal, which is not a collectible log, but a document of an inner life that the main story only partially shows you. When he finds the Bigfoot skeleton and writes about the scale of the thing and whether it was even a man, he is not being prompted by a narrative beat. He is sitting down somewhere quiet and trying to figure out what he saw. The game trusts you to be the kind of player who picks up Arthur's journal and reads it. It trusts you to go back to Blue Water Marsh 16 times in the hope of seeing a ghost. It trusts you to climb a mountain on the off chance there is something at the top worth finding. It trusts you to be moved by a robot calling for its father in the snow. That trust is the whole point. Red Dead Redemption 2 was built for people who slow their horse down and look. For people who read the notes on dead men's bodies and think about the lives those notes represent. For people who find an unfinished painting in an abandoned cabin and come back, and come back, and come back again to see if it has changed. It built a world worth returning to, and then it put things in that world that can only be found by someone who is paying attention. 100 of those things are in this video. There are more out there. There have always been more. In a game this size, built by this many people over this many years, some of them may not have been found yet. Some of them may have been found and documented, and the documentation may be sitting in a forum somewhere, waiting for someone to care. Some of them may have been buried so deep in the game's files that they require tools and techniques and community effort to surface. The frontier is still open. It will probably always be open. That is what Rockstar built, and it is what they intended. Go find something tonight, and when you do, tell us where you found it.